Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movement. My flagship year-long online women's circle is called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year, and I work with clients one-on-one. I also started doing stand-up comedy for fun in 2018. So this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show also aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. Hello, everybody. We are kicking off the journey into the Wild Soul series today. And before we do, if you are listening in real time, it's Monday, November 25th, and this Friday, November 29th, clicks off Black Friday weekend, which I'm not always into huge commercial things, but Black Friday weekend every year, I always do something because I get to feel like Oprah. I put things on sale. I give away all kinds of free stuff and bonuses. And this weekend is like the biggest one I've ever done. It's all about Power 2020, which if you don't know what Power, my year-long women's circle is, make sure you follow me at Elizabeth DiAlto on Instagram or get on our email list. You can go to wildsoulmovement.com/waitlist, and I will be sending out all the details on Friday. And by the way, that invitation page, it is loaded up with details, with the origin story, with the iterations, with the evolution of the program, because I've been running it for 6 years now. There's feedback from alumni. There's obviously all the details of what's included, payment plans, the benefits, who it's for, who it's not for, all these things. But the thing I'm most excited about is when you sign up this weekend, first of all, I'm a person who loves deals. Like, I don't know if any of your family is like this, but my family is like this. If you're like, hey, I love that shirt, they'll be like, oh, thanks, I got it at the flea market for $5. Like, I grew up in a household of people who loves deals. So I think that's why I love being able to create deals for other people so much. But anyway, when you sign up this weekend, you will save $300 off of enrollment. You'll also get a free weekend workshop in 2020. Y'all, weekend workshops are $399. You can come for free next year if you sign up for Power this weekend on Black Friday weekend between November 29th and December 2nd. But that's not the only thing. Here's what I'm also doing. Every year, as part of the fun, because the enrollment period is long, we open it up this weekend, and then the program doesn't start till January 3rd. There's different bonuses. There's pop-up bonuses every weekend throughout the month of December. And so when you sign up, though, Black Friday weekend, you just get all of the bonuses, which is super, super exciting. So if you're someone like me, if you love deals or you're good with your money and you love saving money and you have any interest whatsoever in spending a year with me and a couple hundred wild soul women from all over the world in an incredible healing, growth, transformational container and having space where you always get to feel like you belong and you matter and whatever is up for you is honored. I'd be so excited to have you. And obviously, this is the best weekend to join because deals. So keep an eye out for all that stuff. And now let's get into the first episode of The Journey. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 326 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto. I am your host, Elizabeth DiAlto, and this is episode number 1 of the 2020 Journey into the Wild Soul. I know we're still in 2019, but I call it 2020 because this is a journey that builds the momentum going into the following year. So just wanted that to be clear before we dive in so as not to confuse anyone. And if you are new here or you haven't been through a journey into the wild soul with me before, just to give you a little bit of context, I consider this to be the most wonderful time of year in the wild soul movement world. And as you can imagine, I don't really do holidays in the commercial way our culture at large does. Though I do love to get my Oprah on Black Friday weekend because giving stuff away is my favorite. And because my signature year-long women's circle starts in January, that's called Power. Every year, I craft a bunch of ways to be generous, gather people up, make beautiful invitations, and create unforgettable experiences so that you can feel out whether or not you'd want to take that next step with me. So I've been running some iteration of Power, my year-long women's circle, for 6 years now. And each year it gets better. And that is not just my biased opinion. I've got loads of alumni feedback and case studies and testimonials to share. And it also speaks for itself that some women continue to return 5+ years running. Now, because it's a year-long commitment, I believe it's important to give you a taste of what it's like to work with me in a closed container. And by a closed container, I mean beyond Instagram, beyond just podcast episodes. And as well, to see what kind of people my programs and experiences attract, to suss out if my way of teaching and guiding resonates for you. And of course, regardless of whether or not you decide to join me for Power 2020, for you to have a useful, supportive, and transformative experience going into a new year. So you can join me for the whole journey or just dip in for various events. Throughout December, we're going to have an embodiment challenge, a live streaming embody party, couple other topical workshops, of course, these podcast episodes. There's a Facebook group to go along with the experience. All of these things are free. You could also upgrade for a deeper experience and a bit more personal attention if you want to. And what's important to note is that all of these events are rooted in embodiment and sensual living. And for those who dig it, also offer deeper spiritual perspectives wherever it's appropriate. So it's geeky, it's meaningful, it's fun, it's expansive, it's healing, it's illuminating, and I'd love to get to know you and share these goods with you this season. So if you want to come on the actual journey with us that involves engaging, interacting, being in the Facebook group, sharing your experiences and things like that, you can go to wildsoulmovement.com/journey2020. So wildsoulmovement.com/JOURNEY 2020. There's some other perks that go along with that. You can find out how to upgrade if you want to upgrade and have some weekly calls with me over the course of the next 6 weeks for checking in, for sharing your experience, for being witnessed, for asking questions. Super, super fun. The other thing I want to share is for the first 2 years, this is my 4th year running this experience. For the first 2 years, it was called Unconsume Yourself. And the focus was more on helping people divest themselves from consuming so much in their physical, mental, emotional, and energetic spaces, also their digital spaces. And so we do a bit of that still on the journey because it's important to look at where in your life you are over-consuming and not actually integrating, implementing, digesting, and getting what you need out of the things that you're consuming, right? And that, again, that could be physical stuff, material stuff. It could be food. It could be digital, social media, self-help, podcasts, stuff like this. So part of this journey is to give you an excuse to just like hone in on a couple of really vital, important, crucial things for you and maybe drown out some of the extra noise and maybe identify things that aren't actually serving you as much as you think they are. Maybe some things that are more distracting than they are useful and uplifting or empowering. And so that's one of the big things here. So we don't consume as much, and so we can kind of prioritize things going into a new year. So, a couple years ago, one of the things that I shared when I was doing the Unconsume Yourself challenge versus the journey into the wild soul, which it evolved into, is this idea that more is not always better. And so there's a book called The Soul of Money by a woman named Lynn Twist that I read many, many years ago. And there's a quote from that book: when you let go of trying to get more of what you don't really need, it frees up oceans of energy to make a difference with what you have. And I love this idea of focusing on sufficiency. Like, what is enough? A lot of people spend so much time in their lives focusing on more, 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 or within their own selves feeling like they're too much or not enough. And so, what is enough? What is sufficiency? There's so much power in focusing on enoughness, and not just in the realm of money, right? This concept applies to everything. So as we move through this journey, part of this is to help you let go of trying to get more of what you don't really need and clear away what's distracting you from flourishing with what you already have. And that's not to say you shouldn't or can't pursue more, but that pursuit is much easier when you're not overwhelmed or preoccupied with the not enough, too much dichotomy. So the video lessons, some of these things that I'll post and share in the Facebook group, these podcast episodes, and then those private smaller group calls for anyone who chooses to upgrade their journey will all be things to help you along in this process. And I know it sounds like a big promise, and the reason I can make it is that I've done this work with so many women. I know it works. And of course, this is how I live my own life. I use what I'm going to be teaching you every single day, literally. So again, if you want to come in deeper, what I mean by that is beyond just receiving, and listening to these podcast episodes, having access to some of the other steps and things as well, go to wildsoulmovement.com/journey 2020. So this is exciting. This year, I chose a theme for the journey, and the theme is wholeness. And what I mean by wholeness is I love trusting and understanding that we're all dynamic beings. Life itself is a dynamic experience. So many parts and components, all acceptable, all asking to be integrated or managed and navigated in the highest possible way so that we can thrive, not just on our own, but together as a whole. So as we come into our own wholeness, we're better equipped to contribute to, inspire, or help create wholeness on a larger scale in our society, in our culture, in our own communities, in our own families. Some of you listening to this do that through your work, whether you own a business or it's part of your role wherever you work. Some of you do it within your family by healing your lineage or raising kids who are more conscious and aware than we were or than we got to do, right? Or that's certainly like our parents were. We have access to so much more now than our parents or previous generations did. Our kids might have access to even more than that. And so, these younger generations who are coming up under us really can benefit from all of these things, all this work that we do, all this healing, all this growth, all this transformation. So no matter what your contribution is, that you're here listening to this means you care enough to put some effort into it. And like I say all the time, it's not all about you, but it does start with you. So the first episode of this journey is always to reflect on the year we're about to wrap up and set some context for the experience. My way of doing that isn't always linear. So today, what we're going to begin with is what I like to call a "you can't make this shit up" experience. Last week's podcast episode, which was our last interview of 2019, was with Adrienne Marie Brown. Adrienne is the author of Emergent Strategy, which is this epic book. And I am so excited to get to chat with her. And one of the cool things that happened when I was reading her book was she has a whole section on the study and the practice of somatics. And this is, some of you have heard me talk about this before. When I started to create and develop Wild Soul Movement and the curriculum and the movement practice and like all the various layers and components that go into it, a lot of it kind of just came to me, right? I didn't do a whole bunch of research. I didn't do a whole bunch of trainings with people, even though I had a bunch of trainings and life experiences leading up to that that, of course, equipped me to have body awareness, body knowledge. I'd been a personal trainer for many years. I'd been an athlete for most of my life. I had taught dance classes. I'd gone to so many different types of workshops. I had training in different kinds of energy healing. So, there were some foundational components to it, but there were some deeper aspects to what I was doing that actually are rooted in science and whole fields and deep practices that I had no training or awareness in. But the things that I was incorporating into Wild Soul Movement were literally things from these bodies of work. So, one of the things I always say is, if you don't believe in collective intelligence, I don't know what to tell you, because how the hell was I tapping into that stuff when I didn't actually know it already existed? And then one of the things that has been super validating over the years is to find out about these things that other people who are more scientifically or metaphysically minded than I am have studied, written about, proved, researched, and it's all super valid. So one of those things is the field of somatics. And so in Adrienne Maree Brown's book, Emergent Strategy, she talks about somatics. So literally as recently as like a month ago, I'm still stumbling into things going, oh my goodness, this work, this embodiment work, it's so valid, it's so real. And now I'm just getting more language to describe literally what we've been doing for 6 years. So I want to read you something from Adrienne's book about somatics. And those of you who've been doing Wild Soul Movement with me for a while, whether you've been in Power or older iterations of the online program or have come to workshops, you're going to be like, oh my God, that's literally what we've been doing. So allow me to geek out for a moment. So Adrienne wrote, somatics is the study of the soma, a Greek word that means the living organism in its wholeness. It's a methodology for transformation that helps us understand that change doesn't come simply from thinking differently. The process involves shifting what we understand, what we can feel, and what we practice, reconnecting us with the incredible data and resilience of the body. Somatics talks about the body as 3 billion years of evolutionary wisdom. It's really more than the body in the Cartesian view, body as object or machine. Somatics brings an understanding and way to work with us as a whole: minds, beliefs, emotions, relations, resilience, adaptations, biology, meaning, actions, all within and through the body. And that we are collective bodies as well. We transform both individually and collectively. And I was freaking out when I read that because it's so simple, it's so beautiful, it's such an incredible explanation, literally, of what I've been doing and working on for the last 6 years. And what did it start out with? Wholeness. And when I read this, I had already decided to make this year's Journey into the Wild Souls theme wholeness and integration. And it just felt like, again, this is why I call this a you can't make this shit up moment, because it's like that huge synchronicity and like huge affirmation in life that like, yes, you are on the right track. This is it, at least for right now. So yet again, what I've been experimenting with, synthesizing and created gets validated elsewhere, and we can all feel extra excited about what we're here and what we're doing. And I know I'm yelling. I'm excited. You know me. And if you're new, I get excited and I yell sometimes. So if you're listening in headphones and you had to pull them out, my apologies. But again, it makes me feel so connected to collective intelligence and collective liberation, because where I always find the validation for my work is in other healing, growth, and transformational modalities. It's rooted in these bodies of work that are about helping people get free, whether it's from social justice, from trauma, social injustices, from trauma, from childhood things, from all these things in the world that are undeniable that, we all face in varying degrees and contexts. So for this journey, we really are going to focus on acknowledging and integrating all parts of ourselves, celebrating progress we've made, moving forward despite any current challenges or struggles, because those are not your identity. And this is something that I've been also working around lately, which, by the way, there's some major noise happening outside of my apartment. So if you hear any of that, I apologize, but we're just going to bear with it. So identity is different than integration. Identity, a lot of people make their identity more permanent, fixed, unwavering, and inextricable. Integration leaves room for objectivity, complexity, fluidity. It doesn't deny or prevent anything or close us off from possibility and potential, like identity can when we're clinging to it or overly attached to it. So when we identify with something, we're going, this is me. This is how I am. Like I am, insert this thing. And, metaphysically speaking, anytime we put the words I am in front of something, that is a big energetic claim and attachment. And so we talk about integration so that you're always able to acknowledge and discover new parts of yourself and integrate them, but also at any time, let them go, right? Or give them more weight than others. And I'll give you a personal example. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but, something I have chosen to integrate into my being is being a dancer. I didn't have any formal dance training growing up until I started taking salsa lessons in my 20s, and I became a Zumba instructor when I was still in fitness. No one had ever taught me how to dance. I had never learned how to dance. I was very self-conscious about it, very uncomfortable. I wouldn't dance in front of people unless I was drunk and like out with friends or something. I needed an excuse to dance. Or I couldn't dance unless it was like a joke, like at a talent show or something. So, deciding to really integrate that I am a dancer. My body wants to dance. My body wants to move that way. And specifically the expression of Latin dance, things like salsa and bachata are my absolute favorite. So I've integrated that as part of myself, as part of my being, not necessarily part of my identity, but just as part of who I am. I'm a dancer. I dance. I love dancing. It's a consistent practice and hobby and joy and passion and love of mine. And because of that gives me permission to put some energy and attention and resources into it, right? I'll go to a salsa festival. I'll go to salsa workshops on weekends. I'll take classes. I'll go dancing 2 or 3 nights a week. And the amount of energy and joy and connection and community and friendship that then brings into my life because I'm integrating this from a passion, from a desire, from a curiosity. It really touches a lot of different areas of my life. So that's an example. That's what I mean about integrating. Now, in terms of identifying, I'll give you another example. Recently, someone reached out to me on Instagram to ask about healing from narcissistic abuse. And those of you who have been listening to the podcast for any period of time know that I came out of a relationship over 3 years ago with a narcissistic person. There was a lot of dysfunction there, a lot of emotional abuse. And I talked about it on the podcast a lot. I had people on the podcast. We talked about codependency, emotional abuse, narcissism, gaslighting, all these things, right? Now that I'm through that and it's been integrated, when this person asked if I had any tips, I said, no, I don't talk about that anymore. But I referred her to podcast episodes in our archives that came out of that period in my life when I was navigating that. And it was a central aspect of my experience. And I actually was identifying with that tremendously. So I don't put my energy into those conversations anymore, but it's because I faced it and didn't deny any part of it and let it run its course. I did my healing work, and that resources came out of that can still be useful to other folks who are still all up in it is a great thing. Now, me personally, I choose not to identify as a survivor of abuse or anything like that, and not that there's anything wrong with identifying that way. Some of you might identify as survivors of something or another, but for me, it's not something I want to continue to carry the energy of now that I've integrated and moved on from that experience. So I hope that makes sense. This is one of the reasons why we have a Facebook group to go with this journey, because some of the topics and some of the things that come up in these episodes over the next 6 weeks, I might mention them and not be able to really take a deep dive or fully give them justice, or you might want to know more, or you might want to share more, or you might have a relatable experience. You might want to be witnessed. You might want to ask a question. And I really do encourage you to go deeper. And the way to do that with us along on this journey is to join the full journey. Go in the Facebook group, share those things there. I'm going to be there for you in those things, again, so to help you integrate. I want you to be able to do that. So again, if you want to be able to do that and share and be witnessed, connect, be in community with other wild souls, literally from all over the planet, some of whom have been doing this work with me for many years, some of whom are brand new. At the time I'm recording this, we just opened the Facebook group today. and people are introducing themselves, some of whom have only been listening to the podcast for a couple months, some of whom have literally been with me since like 2012 when I was still a fitness person. So it's a really vast, diverse, deep, really amazing community. I love our Wild Soul community. So again, I might sound like a broken record, but I highly encourage you if you're looking for some connection and integration, the space, the community, the accountability. It's a great way. It's a great way to deepen the experience. And listen, if you want to just listen to the episodes, just listen to the episodes. But again, the link for you is wildsoulmovement.com/journey 2020 if you want to come in a little bit deeper. So the other cool thing about this is that anything can be an alchemical container. So last year in the second or third episode of The Journey, I talked about alchemy. And so I'm not going to get into that in this episode, but if you're curious or interested in that, the basic concept is this. Alchemy is a way of transformation and transmutation, and it requires three things to happen. It needs to happen. It needs a container to happen in. It needs a thing to be transmuted or transformed, and it needs the energy to create the transmutation or the transformation, right? So this journey, again, it's a container. So that, the energy you bring, the energy I bring creates the transformation, and the thing to be transformed or transmuted is you and your life or certain things going on in your world and in your life. And again, the timing of this is great because we just are building momentum going into a new year. And it's a time of year where naturally people are focused on, all right, what do I want to leave in 2019? What do I want to bring into and focus on? And, have some vision and extra energy and intention towards in 2020. So anything could be an alchemical container. All these examples, I'll share a lot of personal experiences throughout these episodes. I will share stories and experiences from clients and alumni in my programs and things like this as well. And I share so many stories and examples so that even if it's in a different context, you can find yourself in the experiences. You can be like, oh, I can relate to that, or oh, that makes sense, or oh, maybe I want to try that, or oh, maybe that might work for me, or that sounds like something a friend of mine can use. Like, it's all here to be super useful. So for me, in this last year and a half, dating was a major container for healing, growth, and transformation. And so I share some of my lessons, and I encourage you to relate to this, whether dating or relationships are a thing that's up for you, or again, if you can put your own context on any of my experiences that I share, meaning maybe you can relate to the lessons elsewhere in your life. It might not be romantic relationships, maybe it's professional relationships, or maybe it's in your family. I mean, that's the point of the journey as well, to apply things wherever they best apply in your own life currently. Everyone's journey is going to look different, but the tools, concepts, insights, and practices are made to be applicable to anything that you've got going on. That's the best part about embodiment-based work. It's flexible, it's agile, and it literally works for freaking everything. Okay, so a couple weeks ago on Instagram, I made a post on the 1-year anniversary, November 4th, of when I had set out to do a year of intentional dating. And I said in that post that I shared some insights, which I'll actually share for you here in case any of you aren't on social media. And then I said I would share some extra insights beyond that. So again, this is why I just said that thing about, again, dating might not be something that's like your container right now, but it was for me. But a lot of these things I'm going to share can apply to other areas of your life as well. So in that post, first of all, the image I used was this graphic or framework that my friend Rachel Maddox, who has been on the podcast, had shared, where she basically defined these 4 different categories. She defined friend as how's life, wanna hang, how's your heart? She defined lover as how can we change each other's lives tonight and still feel awesome tomorrow? She defined dating as what do you really want, and am I a match for that? Could we be that together? And she defined partner as, do you want to do life together? So here's what I wrote on Instagram. I wrote, 1 year ago today, I posted this gorgeous breakdown by my friend Rachel Maddox and set out on a year of intentional dating. Up until that point, I'd been experimental dating, or quote, conscious hoeing, as I enjoyed referring to it because it made me laugh. Shifting into making my dating more intentional changed things. I did some beautiful dancing between the lover and dating categories. I started meeting better for me men and allowed myself to explore a wider range of qualities and attributes so I could get out of concept mode and see what was really for me or not. So I'm going to pause here on that for a second. And again, this can apply to dating. This can apply to other things in our lives. How many times do we think that we need to get super clear on what we want and like have a list and not settle? Meanwhile, these things are just ideas. Like we don't actually know if they're that aligned for us until we try them, until we can be in the experience, until we can feel it, see how it resonates, how it lands for us. So as part of this dating container, that was one of the things I did. I suspended my concepts and I allowed myself to spend time with people that I might not have considered spending time with before, because for whatever reason, I thought certain things about them wouldn't work for me. And I was able to really refine what I'm open to and what I'm not. Like, what are deal makers? What are deal breakers? And then honestly, what is totally negotiable for me? And that can apply to your career. That can apply to hobbies, extracurricular activities, ways that you run your family. This can really apply to so many freaking things. So back to the post here, I wrote, I vacillated between being really open to a serious relationship and unwilling to give up my freedom just yet. I healed a ton of old patterns by giving myself the opportunity to face them again, say no, and walk away instead of getting hooked in and dragged under. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on in this episode, but I do want to take a moment to emphasize again, because there's so much narrative in self-help, spirituality, and personal development that blames people for bumping into things again and finds people asking themselves, why am I still attracting this? What's wrong with me? There might not be anything wrong with you. You might just still be healing. And when you're healing, you will continue to attract similar situations so that you can handle them differently because you have learned, you have different tools. Maybe you're better at boundaries now when you can say no. I'll give you a great example. Again, in this dating context, right now, for those of you who geek out on astrology, this will be relevant. Some of you might not care and you'll roll your eyes, which is fine if it's not for you. But we're currently in a Mercury retrograde. It's in the sign of Scorpio. So one of the things that happens during Mercury retrogrades is we get to review certain experiences, relationships, things that have to do with communication in our lives. And so it's not uncommon during these retrograde periods for people from your past to show back up for whatever reason. And this is, again, does not have to be in a romantic context. But for me personally, literally in just the last week alone, 3 men from my past have popped back in. One of whom was a neighbor of mine who had fallen under the lover category. He literally sent me a message just yesterday. I haven't heard from this person in 6 months. And he sent me a message and was like, hey, how are you? And I was like, I'm good. How are you? And he was like, I'm good. Been traveling for work, blah, 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 blah. Let me know if you're up for a Spanish wine. And, he's from Spain. So like that was a thing. And essentially that was code for like, do you want to come over and hook up? And my response to him, which let me tell you, so the difference, right? Have I had experiences like this before? Have I had men pop back in and be like, hey, what's going on? And try to just like jump right into bed? Of course. And at other points or period in my life where I didn't value myself as much, I might have been open to it. But when this message came in yesterday, I was like, no, thank you. Not hearing from someone at all for 6 months is kind of a turnoff, And he was like, yeah, I understand. I was like, yeah. See you later. And that was that, right? So I said no with grace, but also a little bit of accountability in there, not letting it slide that like, no, you don't get to just ghost for 6 months and then be like, hey, want to do it? It's not how that works. So I wasn't like, why am I still attracting this person? I was more like, cool, this is an opportunity to do something differently than a way I might have done it before, to anchor into how I care for myself, how I value myself, and, what are my current, desires in my life right now. Okay, so back to the post here. I had some real near misses, like so many things that I wanted lined up with some men, but the handful of things that didn't were not workable. So I had to go. This word, workable, I really love. Like sometimes people will say negotiable. I love workable because, all of us humans, we have stuff that we're working on, right? And sometimes when we don't get along with people or when people aren't a fit, what's happening is their issues are bumping into our issues. And sometimes it's workable. Sometimes it's actually worth sticking it out, communicating, using our skills, using our emotional intelligence, being mature, being loving and caring and compassionate, as long as it's not self-sacrificing or self-violent or self-denying, And sometimes it's just not workable. So I just love this concept of like it's workable or it's not, because that feels like a really gentle, loving way to honor that, like, maybe we're in a place where we can do this and we want to and it makes sense, and maybe we're not. But it doesn't make us wrong or bad or broken. It doesn't make the other person wrong or bad or broken. And I'm specifically speaking about people who obviously aren't, highly dysfunctional or abusers or deranged or anything like that, right? Like some people are great, decent, amazing people, and we're just not compatible. And that's okay. But when we are compatible, we just have stuff to work through. I know that I appreciate consideration when I have stuff going on. So why would I not want to extend that to others, And then at the same time, energetically, because life is full and we all have other things going on that sometimes might be more of a priority, we have to say, this works or it doesn't work. Back to the post, I learned to give appropriate benefits of the doubt. I practiced saying really uncomfortable things with kindness and asking for what I needed. I learned to stop being so outcome focused and recognize that sometimes two people simply collide to be valuable medicine for each other. And y'all, I have found this not only in romantic relationships, but in professional relationships and in friendships as well. That quote, some people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. This is really true. And some people will cycle back in and cycle out, whether, again, friendships, romantic relationships, professionally, all these things. And there's great value and there's continued medicine. Sometimes there's like unfinished business that we need to complete with these folks to really get the lesson or to just allow it to be done without any regrets or without any wondering. And then sometimes part of the medicine is that we get to not complete and just live with that we'll never know, right? And accept the unknowing, which can be really brutal and excruciating, but super valuable at the same time. I also realized how simple and primal my deepest desires are, and I dissolved some big barriers to love I didn't know I had. So that was basically that post, and I'll share something else that I wanted to share with you all in hopes that maybe it resonates for you as well. It was really important for me to realize how much of the value in relationships comes from my own magic, deliciousness, receptivity, inherent joy, and pleasure that is always present and pulsing through me. Because, y'all, we are all, in some areas of our lives, really good at justifying things, really good at explaining things. That's what I meant when I said giving appropriate benefits of the doubt. I used to give all kinds of inappropriate benefits of the doubt. And one of the things I realized, and some of you can probably relate to this, is I have literally done so much work on myself. I am so, like, the things that inherently make me who I am, those things remain the same. But in terms of my behavior, my habits, my relational patterns, codependency, emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, communication, boundaries, all these things, I am so far beyond and better at those things than I was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, certainly a decade or more ago. I'm much more receptive. I'm softer. I'm more kind. I'm more compassionate and loving. I'm able to allow people to have their own experiences. I'm not manipulative anymore. All these things that I used to be and do. And so that's a lot of value that I'm bringing into a relational situation, which also allows people to step up or step out pretty quickly, right? Be inspired by it or be intimidated by it. And so one of the things that I noticed in relationships is things often felt better than they actually were because I just generally feel good and enjoy my life. And I'm not easily perturbed or easily triggered the way that I used to be. And so that's a really good thing in a lot of ways. And in some ways it's not, because it meant that I didn't realize, you know what, like this actually isn't okay with me. But that's the cool thing about also developing and cultivating patience, right? As you show up and you stay present and you stay aware of, what's going on here, as you use embodiment tools and practices, right? Feeling for the yes and the no and the truth that your body is always communicating to you, like the resonance or the dissonance, right? The discernment. This is yes for me. This is good for me. This is not. Or this is worth exploring, or I'm at least curious. Let me investigate a little bit more and then see. Let me gather a little more data and see how I feel. Then we can really decide. And so I realized that often I knew within a couple of dates whether or not something was really going to be like viable or workable or exciting. But it would go a couple more dates because I just felt good, right? And like, not everyone is like doing anything egregious. Not everyone's an asshole. Not everyone is doing something super wrong or offensive. So that was a really interesting thing for me to notice. Like, and again, that I want to impart on all of you as you do your work, as you enjoy your life more, as you move out of surviving into thriving, things might just feel fine because you do, right? But are they actually adding value? And is there actual reciprocity? Is it an even energetic exchange? An even energetic exchange doesn't necessarily look like you and I are giving each other the same thing, right? But it's more like, are we bringing equal value to this situation, right? Am I being filled up just as much as I'm giving? And in that way, right? Because reciprocity can sometimes be hard to quantify. And so these are things in terms of getting to know yourself to notice, like what is in this particular situation, what does reciprocity look like for me? And another concept that my friend Alia, who was on the podcast earlier this year, also helped me to understand was like, I don't necessarily need what I bring to the table, right? Like I bring a lot of like joy and fun and humor. So do I necessarily need someone to bring that? Not necessarily in the same exact way I do, right? But certainly someone who's like down for it and enjoys it and can add to it. Maybe they have a different sense of humor. So combined, we're experiencing like a fuller range of humor, right? Like I don't need someone who thinks exactly the way I think or who sees everything exactly the way I do, because then, how do we grow? Right? I want something that's like complementary. I want something that's dynamic. I want something that's going to cause me to like expand and like get out of my box, right? I don't want to just be in the same bubble I'm always freaking in my own life. And so, again, these are just things that I offer up to you for whatever context they might apply. So integration and wholeness, to come back to the theme of this year's journey, allow us to face things and make them useful. And so some of you, for years I've been sharing this prayer that I say on the daily: use me, move me, and make me a force for expansion, for love, for good, and for healing. And so I think I've already mentioned this. We are all healing something all the time. Part of why these times that we're living in right now are so intense is because everyone has trauma, but not everyone is healing it or even conscious or aware of it. So often, the most challenging exchanges, interactions, and relationships we have with folks is because our traumas are interacting with their traumas, not our highest selves, not our emotionally intelligent or mature selves or our wild souls. So we journey to connect to and bring those parts to the forefront so we don't have to be the ones dragged down, mired in, and being run by our traumas forever. We journey so we can rise, so we can expand, so we could grow, so we can transform. We journey so we can literally become, like the very famous and the very overused Gandhi quote says, the change we want to see in the world. So we could lead by example. And again, it's not all about us, but it starts with us, because we can't control or change others, but we can absolutely work on how we react, how we respond to, and how we experience things. And then again, lead by example and inspire others as we learn to thrive or have more joy, pleasure, passion, purpose, and live from our power. So let's talk about healing for a little bit. I sent out an email last week with some metaphors about healing. And since it's such a different kind of journey for each person, depending on what you're moving through, I want to share these things with you. And again, some of these metaphors might land, some of them might not. As always, ditch what doesn't resonate for you and then, take and run with whatever does. So here's what I wrote. One of the things that I love most about my work is that it attracts people who've already been doing some kind of work on themselves. So if you're here, you're no stranger to healing and growth. And because this is embodiment work, it will always meet you wherever you are, never force you to push through places you're not ready to. And it will constantly remind you not to compare your journey to others because there's too many dynamic and distinguishing factors to ever make direct comparisons. I also provide many different types of tools to meet you where you are and honor where you are and how you're built and that your beliefs may differ so that some tools might be for you, others might not. So for example, some people are looking for a deeper, more spiritual experience. For those people, things like prayers and guided visualizations where we connect to the divine and other beings of light who love you unconditionally are great. Some folks are like, meh, I'm going to stick to the more practical stuff, and that's great also. However, just because you've been doing your work for any period of time doesn't mean that you're experiencing ease, greater results, or seeing the shifts and changes you want to see. And just because you're not seeing them doesn't mean they aren't happening. So let me explain what I mean by that. When you go beyond surface level healing and growth concepts, such as mindset work, the shifts and changes begin to happen on more subtle levels. So you might not feel super different or see your outer world changing dramatically because it's the incremental shifts over time that really need to add up. A client of mine once described this as moving a mountain an inch. And that's a big deal if you think about it. And a lot of us have inner mountains to move. So one of the things that's helped me immensely are metaphors of portals, thresholds, tunnels, and spirals. So every year around my birthday, that feels like a portal. I actually have just started calling it the birthday portal. And a portal is a doorway, a gate, or other entrance. So what I'm entering into is a new phase of life. So I take some time to reflect on the phase I'm closing out so I could decide what's worthy of coming forward with me and what needs to be left behind. And also what I'm intending to conjure or create in the near future. The energy of the portal to me feels like I'm in a slingshot being pulled back, just about ready to release. The portal is like the process of the slingshot being pulled back. Now, threshold occurs at the end of the portal, standing on the brink, literally about to take that final step into the next phase, right? It's like literally walking through a doorway, which is considered a threshold. This reminds me a lot of a rocket ship moving through the gravitational pull of the Earth on its way into space. So it's one of the more intense and forceful legs of the journey. And it's also like the saying, the darkest part of the night is right before the dawn. So that's the threshold. The tunnel metaphor feels like a phase that's like head down, forging forward. It could be dark, can feel scary, uncertain, but you're moving through it. The tunnel can precede the portal or exist within the portal. And this is a real focus phase. It can feel like drudgery. This is where resilience and clarity get forged, where discipline, holy consistency, and sacred restraint are most necessary. And all of these are concepts I've spoken about before, and I will revisit them in the journey into the wild soul. So the portal, threshold, and tunnel can be integrating metaphors, meaning they can interact with each other, or they can stand alone. The spiral, though, stands alone and is super useful, especially for perfectionist types who think they should be done with something the first time. That is not how spiral works. As you heal and grow, you'll be asked to revisit certain lessons. And I mentioned this earlier, not because you didn't get it the first time, but because now you have different perspective, different tools and insights, and you literally are different, so you get to respond differently. This is a way of proving to yourself that you have made progress. It should feel exciting, not be something you beat yourself up about. Whenever I find myself refacing something I've worked on before, I like to think, ooh, yes, how could I do this differently, better, with more ease or more skill than last time? And that's what I do, even if it's just marginally better, because a 1% shift is still a shift. I share all of this with you to remind you that healing and growth are not linear. They occur in cycles and seasons. There are different phases and legs of each journey, and how you relate to and approach them can really impact how you move on and through them. It's also timely because we're coming up on the holiday season and not only a new year, but a new decade. So there are some major portals, thresholds, tunnels, and spirals ahead of us this time of year. And one thing I do around this time every year to help you thrive is this journey into the wild soul. So that's what we're here for. And I want to let you all know, in terms of being the leader of this journey, I know that 2019 kicked a lot of people's asses, but I am not one of those people. 2019 was a year of closing out a lot of old stuff, expanding into what's next, and anchoring into my own next phase of resiliency, power, truth, and purpose. So I am more equipped than ever to hold some space for you and facilitate some major momentum in your life. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this experience together this year. And I really saw this in the Power 2019 group this year as I collected feedback from this year's group to make some tweaks and upgrades for 2020. One thing a lot of people mentioned was how seeing where other people were impacted their own experiences. From being inspired to set boundaries and not engage in the Facebook group, to feeling super appreciative to not be in some of the earlier stages that some other people are, to totally being able to relate and not feel alone where they were. So again, that community aspect, whether you join the Facebook group just to be in there and be in the energy, whether you actually want to actively participate or not, seeing how other people are navigating their journey often affirms, confirms, highlights, illuminates, and inspires your own journey. And it's also just a good reminder that there are, of course, places and spaces where you absolutely belong, you're invited, and you're wanted, right? We live in a time where things can feel really isolated. And as well, the way the current world is set up, especially with all this, I call this the illusion of connectivity, right? We're all plugged in all the time, right? We have social media, news is a 24/7 thing. It's so much. And our nervous systems actually aren't built for so much stimulus, so much information, so much connection all the time. And not that the world is in a worse state than it's ever been, but we see all of it and have access to so much 24/7 via social media because everyone is a journalist now, meaning everyone has a camera, everyone has a social media or a Facebook account, or can just shoot off an opinion as if it's a fact. And then we're reading these things all day long, not knowing how to discern what's real and what's not, right? People are literally capturing things that we never would have seen even a decade ago, right? Because there were still news cycles and newspapers, not 24/7, all day, every day news. So we are just inundated. It's just more volume of information, right? And so often we're consuming this information and we're seeing all these things from our devices. Sometimes we're alone or we're by ourselves. We might feel super isolated. So I want to remind you, I want to come back full circle to one of the things we talked about in the beginning, which is sufficiency, which is developing some discernment around what's enough, right? What's healthy for you to consume and what is not? Where do you need to set some boundaries with yourself? And again, this journey invites you, in terms of your healing, growth, and transformation, to have something to anchor you in and focus on, right? Maybe you drown out some of the other noise. Maybe you don't follow as much social media. Maybe you don't read as many books or listen to as many podcasts. You can focus in on this throughout the rest of the year and then reevaluate going into the new year. All right, what do I want to add back into the mix? Again, to just give you a place to focus and integrate and anchor in and commune and be together and do this with a group of people. So the last thing I want to wrap up this first episode of The Journey on is to remind you that the Arc of Power is the curriculum that I've designed and refined for the Power Women's Circle. And again, part of this journey is to give those of you who are considering doing that work with me a taste of what it would be like, so you can really make a highly informed choice. I want you to be able to feel into it, feel into me as your guide, feel into the community, the way I hold space and all those things, because a year is a solid commitment. And I want you to really feel all in if you decide to do that with me. And even if you don't decide to do that with me, I want you to get a lot out of this experience. And so I'm going to take you through and I'm going to open up a little bit about the Arc of Power in this series. And so just to review, the topics in the Arc of Power are surrender and release, trust and receptivity. And this year, for the first time ever, I am switching the third topic. It used to be wild dreaming and desire, but we're going more deeply into passion and purpose in 2020. And I'll tell you the reason why in a moment. And then the last topic is love and truth. All of these things cumulatively all anchor you into your personal power, whatever your expression of that is right now, wherever you are. And so, like I said earlier, this is designed to meet you where you are, right? To help you journey through whatever you've got going on and apply these things to your life wherever it's appropriate. So there's a framework to follow and there's topics to follow, but there's no right or wrong way to be with them, right? Like you literally can only be with them in the way that serves you and is relevant to whatever's going on in your life. And this is one of the reasons why so many women come back year in and year out to continue to just go through the arc of power again. Because truly, I mean, at every different phase and stage of your life, you're going to be working surrender. There will be things to release. We can always cultivate deeper trust, become more receptive, facing passion and purpose or, constant questions for people. This year, when I started working in the Akashic Records, that question, what is my purpose, was like the number one question people would want to know in their readings. And then, love and truth, these things permeate every area of our life all the time and are constantly evolving. And so this year in 2019, when we got to wild dreaming and desire, and especially after doing so many Akashic Records readings this year, I just had an instinct to progress that topic beyond just wild dreaming and desire to passion and purpose. And it's partly because of like the state of the world and the way things are going. So many people feel compelled and called to serve, right? Whether it's by starting a business or by doing some more meaningful kind of work or by figuring out how to show up more meaningfully in their own lives, whether it's, again, in their work, in their family, with their kids that they're raising, for themselves, in their healing. And so we're really going to be digging into, because people also conflate passion and purpose. A lot of people are out there teaching folks, turn your passions into your purpose. And I'll share more about this maybe in next week's episode of The Journey. I don't remember which one it's in, about, I did that when I worked in fitness. I took one of my lifelong passions and I turned it into my purpose and I made it into my career. And then when I was done as fitness being my purpose, I couldn't even get back into it as a passion for 6 whole years. So there's a lot of people confusing passion and purpose. And so it's a really worthwhile thing to explore so that we can be benefiting from the energy of our passions in an appropriate way and not putting so much pressure on the things we love to make us money or be some kind of purpose. And sometimes too, we can surrender to and just accept that some of our purposes are a little more mundane. And there's nothing freaking wrong with that, right? Like there's so much, especially when it comes to purpose, comparison and judgment that we judge ourselves, or we buy into other people's concepts and ideas of purpose. And then we put all kinds of pressure on ourselves. We try to force ourselves to be things and people and show up in ways that are not appropriate for who we actually are at our core. And so I'm a no for that, right? Like the core tagline and theme and mission of Wild Soul Movement has always been everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. And so this is really about always different ways to coming home to yourself. We are all about cultivating faith that is much stronger than your fear. And your fear might never fully go away. That's not necessary. But how can you rise above it more often than not? That's a way to live a full, meaningful life, using whatever life experiences you have to do your work. So that was my year in review. That was my intro to the journey into the wild soul for you. Again, the specific details, some perks, what we'll be covering, how it all works, are all beautifully laid out at the page at wildsoulmovement.com/journey2020. And I also want to remind you, part of this is to gather. Part of this is to do something together. So if you have any friends, whether they live near you or not, or loved ones or siblings, that was a cool thing this year. We had a couple people come to workshops with their siblings, cousins. Some people brought their moms. It was so cool. So maybe you want to do this with someone, have a buddy or a couple buddies or accountability partners. Over the next 5 episodes, I'll give you a lot of things to explore and reflect on. You could even treat this like a book club where you gather weekly, either virtually on a platform like Skype or Zoom or FaceTime or something like that. Or you can get together if your people are local to chat about what's coming up and what's going on. So that's it, y'all. We have officially begun. The journey is kicked off. Thank you for tuning in. Next week, we're going to get into some ingredients for true, deep, real, sustainable, and super effective healing, growth, and transformation. One of them is something people resist so hard. So I'm going to give it to you with a ton of grace. You can actually let it in and experience the benefits of the magic of this thing. Can't wait. Thank you so much. So again, whether you join the journey and you want to pop into the Facebook group, I'm excited to connect with you and get to know some of you more personally there. If you're not joining in on that, you're also always more than welcome to shoot us an email at hello@wildsoulmovement with your thoughts, or find me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto and send me a DM. All right. We'll see you next week.
More older, like it's like both older than myself and tapped into something that is more continuous than just my short life. Yeah. So I feel like that's clicked through for me, that I'm like, I'm not going to live forever. And that's not actually, that wouldn't be a good thing. So here's the time that I have, and how can I pick up like the best threads that are moving through our species